The fluorescent lights in the county auction hall buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across Maya Chen's face as she studied the grainy photograph pinned to the bulletin board. 7 months pregnant, her back aching from standing too long. She squinted at the image of what appeared to be little more than a pile of rubble, with a faded marquee barely visible through decades of neglect. The Starlight Theater. Condemned. Minimum bid. 75 cents. Around her, professional auctioneers and estate liquidators moved with practiced efficiency, marking their catalogues with red pens. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. Discussing lot numbers and profit margins in hushed tones that suggested they'd done this dance 1,000 times before. Maya didn't belong here. She knew it. They knew it. But desperation had a way of putting people in places they never imagined. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Another text from her landlord. 3 days until eviction. She silenced it without reading the full message. She'd memorized the numbers already. $2,400 in back rent. Medical bills from her pregnancy complications totaling another $6,000. And in her checking account, exactly $912, the remains of her final paycheck from the architecture firm that had laid her off 3 weeks ago. "Miss, you planning to bid or just window shopping?" A gruff voice startled her from her calculations. The auctioneer, a barrel-chested man with a weathered face and kind eyes, stood beside her, holding a clipboard thick with paperwork. I'm not sure yet," Maya admitted, one hand instinctively moving to her swollen belly where her daughter had been kicking steadily all morning, as if urging her mother toward some unknown decision. The man followed her gaze to the photograph of the condemned theater. "The Starlight," he said, shaking his head. "Been sitting empty for almost 30 years. City's been trying to demolish it for a decade. But there's some historic preservation group fighting them. Meantime, it just sits there, rotting." He paused, studying Maya's obvious pregnancy. "You sure you want to get involved with something like that? In your condition?" Maya bristled slightly at the concern in his voice, though she knew it came from kindness rather than judgment. "What's the catch?" she asked instead. "Why is the minimum bid only 75 cents? The auctioneer chuckled without humor. "Because whoever buys it inherits a nightmare. The building's condemned, structurally unsound, asbestos throughout. The city requires whoever purchases it to either restore it to code within 6 months or pay for professional demolition. We're talking hundreds of thousands either way." He tapped his clipboard. "Most of these properties, nobody bids at all. They just go back to the city for tax default. So why auction it? Legal requirement. Has to be offered to the public first." He studied her more carefully. "Look, miss, I don't know your situation, but that building is a money pit. Even at 75 cents, it's a bad investment." Maya nodded slowly, turning back to study the photograph. The Starlight Theater had been built in 1947, according to the faded placard beneath the image. Art Deco architecture, once grand, now merely haunting. Through the grime and decay, she could make out the curved lines, the geometric patterns that had once made it a jewel of the downtown district, before the highways came, before the shopping malls, before the city center hollowed out, leaving buildings like the Starlight as tombstones to a forgotten era. "When does bidding start?" Maya asked quietly. The auctioneer sighed, recognizing the determination in her voice. 20 minutes, lot 47. He started to walk away, then turned back. "For what it's worth, I hope you know what you're doing." Maya wasn't sure she did, but as she felt her daughter kick again, harder this time, she thought about the alternative. 3 days. Until eviction. No job. No family to turn to, since her parents had passed away in a car accident 2 years ago. And Marcus, the father of her child, had made his position clear when she told him about the pregnancy. "I'm not ready for this. I'm sorry." The text messages had stopped 6 weeks ago. The promised child support checks had never materialized. She was alone, broke, and running out of options. The auction began with commercial properties nobody wanted. A strip mall with a collapsed roof, a warehouse with environmental contamination, a parking garage with structural damage. Each one garnered polite silence from the assembled crowd, then quiet notation as they reverted to city ownership. Lot 47, the auctioneer finally called. The Starlight Theater, 847 Broadway. Built 1947. Approximately 15,000 square feet. Condemned status. Sold as is. Where is? Buyer assumes all liability for restoration or demolition. Minimum bid 75 cents. The room fell silent. Maya could hear her own heartbeat in her ears, the blood rushing through her veins as her hand trembled. "Do I have 75 cents?" The auctioneer's voice echoed in the nearly empty hall. Maya's paddle rose before her conscious mind had fully committed to the decision. "Here." Every head in the room turned. A few people exchanged glances, some pitying, some curious. In the back row, a man in an expensive suit leaned forward slightly, his expression shifting from bored to interested. 75 cents to paddle 32, the auctioneer announced. "Do I have $1? Silence stretched. Maya allowed herself a moment of hope. "Maybe $1. The voice came from the back. The man in the expensive suit, his paddle raised with casual confidence. Maya's heart sank. She turned to look at him properly for the first time. Late 50s, silver hair, perfectly styled, suit that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. His expression was unreadable, but there was something calculating in his eyes. $1 to paddle 9, the auctioneer continued. "Do I have 125? Maya hesitated. Every additional quarter was a quarter she didn't have for food, for gas, for the dozens of small expenses that would compound into disaster. But something about the man's expression bothered her. Why would someone dressed like that want a condemned theater? 125, Maya called out, her voice stronger than she felt. The man smiled slightly. $2, $3, Maya countered, her pulse racing. $5. The bidding continued. Maya's determination growing with each increase despite the cold reality that she was spending money she couldn't afford on a building she didn't want. But she couldn't shake the feeling that if this man wanted it badly enough to bid against a clearly desperate pregnant woman, there had to be a reason. $20 to paddle 9, the auctioneer announced. "Do I have 25? Maya looked at her paddle, at the number 32 that had seemed so simple when she registered. $25. It was nothing in the grand scheme of her debts, but it was also everything: gas money, groceries, the small buffer between absolute zero and complete destitution. The man in the expensive suit caught her eye and shook his head slightly, a gesture that seemed almost sympathetic. "Don't," his expression seemed to say. "You're only hurting yourself." Maya's paddle rose. $25. A flash of annoyance crossed the man's face, quickly suppressed. $50. The room had gone completely silent now. Everyone watching this bizarre contest between a wealthy businessman and a pregnant woman over a building that wasn't worth the land it occupied. $75, Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. The man stood, buttoning his suit jacket with deliberate precision. For a moment, Maya thought he would walk out, conceding the worthless property to her foolishness. Instead, he walked toward her, his expression carefully neutral. "Miss, I don't know what you think you're going to do with that building," he said quietly, voice low enough that only she and a few nearby people could hear. "But I'm prepared to go to $500 if necessary. That theater is part of a development project I've been planning for 3 years. I need that property." Maya looked up at him, noting the expensive watch, the manicured nails, the air of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted. Then why was the minimum bid 75 cents? His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. If you find this story engaging, Please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. City paperwork error. It should have been $7,500. By the time we caught it, the auction notice was already published. Legal has to honor the listed minimum. He pulled out a business card, pressing it into her hand. I'll give you $2,000 right now to withdraw your bid. Walk away, take the money, use it for your baby. $2,000. It would cover rent, buy, her time. Let her catch her breath. Maya looked at the card. Victor Reeves, Reeves Development Corporation. Going once, the auctioneer called. $50 to paddle 9. Maya should take the deal. Any rational person would take the deal. But something in Victor Reeves' urgency, in the tightness around his eyes, made her hesitate. If this building was really just a condemned wreck, why offer $2,000 for it? Why bid at all? Going twice. $100, Maya said clearly, keeping her eyes locked on Reeves. His expression hardened. You're making a serious mistake. Sold. The auctioneer's gavel came down with startling finality. Lot 47 to paddle 32 for $100. Reeves stared at her for a long moment, then turned and walked out without another word. The door slammed behind him with enough force to echo through the hall. Maya stood frozen, her paddle still raised, as the reality of what she'd just done crashed over her. She'd just spent $100 more than 10% of everything she had left in the world on a condemned building she had no idea what to do with. The auctioneer approached, paperwork in hand, his expression a mixture of concern and admiration. Well, congratulations, I suppose. You just became the proud owner of 15,000 square feet of liability. He handed her the documents. You've got 72 hours to complete the transaction and take possession. After that, you've got 6 months to either restore the building to code or arrange for demolition. Maya signed with trembling hands, barely processing the words on the forms. Certificate of sale. Assumption of all liens and encumbrances. Acknowledgement of condemned status. Each signature felt like stepping off a cliff. One piece of advice, the auctioneer said as she handed back the completed forms. Get inside that building as soon as possible. Look around before you commit to anything. Sometimes these old theaters have architectural salvage worth something. Copper, fixtures, stuff like that, might help offset the demolition costs. As Maya walked out into the afternoon sunlight, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was her best friend, Jenna. How'd the auction go? Please tell me you didn't actually bid on anything. Maya stared at the certificate of sale in her hands, at the official-looking stamps and signatures that declared her the legal owner of the Starlight Theater. I need your truck, she said quietly. And maybe a flashlight. Can you meet me at 847 Broadway? Maya, what did you do? Something stupid. Or possibly brilliant. I honestly have no idea which. The Starlight Theater looked even worse in person than in the photograph. Maya stood across the street, Jenna beside her. Both women staring at what could generously be described as a disaster. The Art Deco marquee that had once announced glamorous premieres now hung at a dangerous angle, its neon tubes long since shattered or stolen. The facade's geometric patterns were barely visible beneath layers of grime, graffiti, and water damage. Plywood covered most of the windows, though several sheets had rotted through or been torn away, revealing darkness within. Oh, Maya, Jenna breathed. Please tell me you didn't actually buy this. $100. 100. Jenna turned to stare at her friend. Okay, that's not as bad as I thought. Wait, is that good or bad? I can't tell anymore. Maya felt her daughter kick, a rolling movement that suggested the baby was turning over. She placed both hands on her belly, trying to calm her racing thoughts. A man named Victor Reeves tried to stop me from bidding, offered me $2,000 to walk away. Jenna's eyes widened. $2,000? And you didn't take it? He seemed too desperate. If this place is just a condemned wreck, why offer that much? Maya started across the street. moving carefully despite her urgency. There has to be something here. Something he wants. The front entrance was secured with a chain and padlock, but the legal documents in Maya's purse included a key. Her hands shook as she fumbled with the lock, Jenna holding the flashlight steady. The chain fell away with a rusty clatter. Maya pushed against the door. For a moment it resisted, swollen from decades of moisture and neglect. Then, with a groan of protesting hinges, it opened. The smell hit them first: mildew, decay, years of abandonment compressed into a single assault on the senses. Jenna coughed, pulling her jacket over her nose. Maybe we should come back with masks. This can't be safe for you or the baby. But Maya had already stepped inside, playing her own flashlight across the lobby. Despite the decay, despite the water damage and the obvious signs of vandalism and time, the Starlight's former glory was still visible like a ghost beneath the destruction. The ticket booth stood in the center of the lobby, its brass fixtures tarnished but intact. The terrazzo floor, though cracked and stained, still showed glimpses of the geometric pattern that had once welcomed moviegoers. The walls rose in sweeping curves toward a domed ceiling, where faded murals depicted stars and comets in the Art Deco style. "It's beautiful," Maya whispered, almost despite herself. Or it was. They moved deeper into the building, their flashlights creating moving pools of illumination in the darkness. The main auditorium stretched before them, row after row of seats most ripped, many missing entirely. The screen was gone, probably stolen long ago for the silver it contained. But the proscenium arch remained, elaborate plasterwork depicting the same celestial theme as the lobby. "Look at the detail," Maya murmured, running her hand along a wall panel. Even beneath the grime, the craftsmanship was evident. This building had been created when artistry mattered, when theaters were palaces of entertainment rather than mere functional spaces. Jenna was more practical. "Look at the water damage and the holes in the ceiling. Maya, this place needs hundreds of thousands of dollars in work, maybe millions." She pointed to where part of the balcony had collapsed, leaving twisted metal and broken wood jutting into space. "It's not safe." Maya knew her friend was right. The rational choice was to walk away, absorb the $100 loss, maybe try to negotiate with Victor Reeves after all. But something about the Starlight called to her, whispered promises in the darkness. Or maybe that was just desperation talking, her mind clinging to fantasy because reality had become too painful to face. They explored for another hour, documenting damage on Maya's phone, trying to assess just how bad the situation really was. The projection booth was gutted, everything of value long since stripped. The balcony was definitely unsafe, ceiling panels hanging like broken teeth. The basement flooded, at least 2 feet of stagnant water, covering what had probably once been storage and mechanical rooms. It was in the backstage area, behind the remains of the proscenium arch, that they found the first real surprise. A narrow staircase descended beneath the stage itself, so well hidden by fallen debris that Maya almost missed it entirely. Only the draft of air, slightly cooler than the stagnant atmosphere around them, drew her attention. "Maya, we should not go down there," Jenna said firmly. "Unknown basement in a condemned building while you're 7 months pregnant? This is how horror movies start." But Maya was already clearing away broken wood and chunks of plaster, revealing more of the staircase. The steps were concrete, surprisingly intact, descending into darkness that her flashlight couldn't fully penetrate. "I just want to look," Maya said. 5 minutes, then we'll go. I promise." The stairs were steep, requiring careful navigation. Maya moved slowly, one hand on the wall for balance, the other holding her flashlight. Behind her, Jenna followed reluctantly, muttering about tetanus and structural instability and how they were both going to die. The stairs ended in a corridor, concrete walls lined with doors. Most were locked or rusted shut, but one stood slightly ajar. Maya pushed it open, stepping into a room that stole the breath from her lungs. It was a dressing room, preserved in a way the rest of the theater hadn't been. The concrete walls had protected it from the worst of the water damage. Costumes still hung on racks, period pieces from the 1940 seconds through the 1960 seconds. Makeup tables lined one wall, their mirrors intact, though covered with decades of dust. "This is incredible," Jenna breathed, her earlier fear forgotten. These costumes, some of them might be worth money. Vintage clothing collectors would pay for pieces in this condition. Maya moved through the room, running her fingers along silk dresses and wool suits, each one a snapshot of vanished eras. On one of the makeup tables, she found a photograph in an ornate frame. It showed a woman in an elegant gown standing on the Starlight stage, surrounded by an audience in formal wear. The back of the frame was inscribed, "Grand Opening, the 12th of July, 1947. Catherine Starling, proprietor." "The owner," Maya murmured, studying the woman's confident smile. Catherine Starling, the Starlight. They continued exploring the backstage rooms, finding more artifacts, programs from productions, accounting ledgers, boxes of correspondence. It was like discovering a time capsule, a complete record of the theater's life, from its glamorous opening through its gradual decline. It was in the fourth room, what appeared to have been a private office, that Maya found the locked cabinet. It was built into the wall, steel door painted to match the concrete, nearly invisible, except for the keyhole. She wouldn't have noticed it at all if her flashlight hadn't caught the reflection at just the right angle. "Jenna," she called, "look at this." Her friend joined her, examining the cabinet. Probably empty, or full of old paperwork. Why lock paperwork? Maya tried the handle, but it held firm. This is serious security for an old theater. Maybe Catherine kept money in there, Jenna suggested. Box office receipts or something? Maya sat back on her heels, studying the cabinet. It was too well made, too deliberately hidden, to contain something ordinary. She thought again of Victor Reeves, of his desperate attempt to outbid her, his offer of $2,000 for a condemned building. "We need to open this," Maya said quietly. "How?" "You don't have the key, and we can't exactly crowbar it without damaging whatever's inside." Maya thought for a moment, then remembered something from the lobby. The ticket booth. There was a board with keys behind it. Maybe. They returned to the lobby. Maya, moving more slowly now, fatigue settling into her pregnant body. Behind the ticket booth's tarnished brass window, a wooden board held dozens of keys on small hooks, each one labeled in faded handwriting. Maya scanned them with her flashlight until she found one marked "Private Office Safe." "Worth a try," she muttered, carefully removing the key from its hook. Back in the office, the key fit perfectly. The lock was stiff, resisting for a moment before giving way with a soft click. Maya pulled open the steel door, her heart pounding. Inside was a wooden box, about the size of a large briefcase, its surface covered with elaborate inlay work. Maya lifted it carefully, surprised by its weight. She set it on the desk, hands trembling as she examined the clasp. Unlike the cabinet, this box wasn't locked. The clasp opened easily. Inside, nestled in velvet that had faded to dusty rose, were dozens of small leather pouches. Maya opened one, tilting it into her palm. Several small stones tumbled out, catching the light from her flashlight and throwing rainbow sparks across the dark room. "Oh my God," Jenna whispered. "Are those diamonds?" Maya breathed. "They're diamonds." For a long moment, neither woman could speak. Maya opened another pouch, then another. Each one contained more stones, diamonds of various sizes. Some small as grains of rice, others as large as her thumbnail. Some were clearly cut and polished, others appeared rough, but all of them shared that unmistakable fire when light hit them at the right angle. At the bottom of the box, beneath the pouches, was an envelope. Maya opened it with shaking hands, pulling out several documents, and a letter in elegant cursive handwriting. To whoever finds this collection, Maya read aloud, her voice trembling. My name is Catherine Starling, and these stones represent 37 years of careful investment and protection. When I opened the Starlight Theater in 1947, I did so with money earned through my family's diamond-cutting business. My father, Abraham Starling, was one of the finest cutters in New York before the war. He taught me not just the craft, but the value of patience and preservation. Throughout the theater's operation, I invested every profit back into diamonds, purchasing rough stones and cutting them myself in the workshop below the stage. This collection represents not just financial security, but a life's work. Each stone was carefully selected, cut, and documented. I am leaving these diamonds here because I have no heirs to inherit them, and because the Starlight itself is the legacy I wish to leave behind. Whoever finds this collection, I hope you will use it not just for personal gain, but to restore this theater to its former glory. The Starlight was built to bring joy and wonder to our community. It deserves better than to crumble into dust. Signed, Catherine Starling. The 3rd of June 1984. Maya set down the letter, her mind reeling. Beneath it were appraisals from 1984, yellowed with age but still legible. Conservative estimates valued the collection at $3.2 million in 1984. Currency. How much would they be worth now? Jenna whispered. Maya's hands were shaking too much to operate her phone properly. Jenna took it from her, searching for diamond value trends over the past 40 years. Diamonds have appreciated significantly since the 1980 seconds, she read. Particularly high-quality stones like these appear to be. Conservative estimate would be. She paused, double-checking her calculations. Somewhere between $12 and $15 million. Maybe more if some of these are exceptionally rare. The number was too large to comprehend. Maya looked at the dozens of pouches, at the carefully documented inventory sheets Catherine had left, at the photographs showing the woman who had built an entire secret legacy beneath her theater. We need to tell someone, Jenna said. The police? A lawyer? I don't even know what you're supposed to do when you find millions of dollars in diamonds. But Maya was thinking of Victor Reeves, of his desperate bidding, his offer of $2,000. He knew, she said slowly. Reeves knew about the diamonds. That's why he wanted the building. How could he know? You said Catherine had no heirs. Maya picked up the inventory sheets, studying them more carefully. Each diamond was listed with its weight, cut, and estimated value. But there was something else, a notation at the bottom of the last page. Original appraisals completed by Reeves and Associates, Diamond Merchants, New York, 1984. Reeves, Jenna breathed. The same family? Has to be. Maya's mind was racing now, pieces falling into place. Victor Reeves' father, maybe his grandfather, appraised these diamonds for Catherine. He would have records, would know what she had. When the theater was abandoned, those records would have passed down through the family. So he's been waiting for a chance to buy the building for cheap and find the diamonds, Jenna finished. But the Historic Preservation Group kept blocking demolition. Until now, Maya added. Until the city finally gave up and auctioned it off for 75 cents. They sat in silence, the magnitude of the discovery settling over them. Maya looked at the diamonds again, at the carefully labeled pouches, at Catherine's elegant handwriting documenting each stone. This wasn't just a fortune, it was a woman's life work, her legacy, her hope for the future. What are you going to do? Jenna asked quietly. Maya thought about her eviction notice, about the medical bills, about raising a daughter alone, with no job and no support. She thought about Victor Reeves and his expensive suit, his confident assumption that he could intimidate a desperate pregnant woman into giving up a fortune. And she thought about Catherine Starling, who had poured her life into this building and these stones, who had dreamed of restoration rather than demolition. I'm going to do what Catherine asked, Maya said finally. I'm going to restore the Starlight. The legal implications of Maya's discovery hit her before she'd even left the building. As Jenna drove them home, Maya sat in the passenger seat, the wooden box secured in her lap, her mind spinning through the complexities. Did the diamonds belong to her? The building was legally hers, and everything in it. But there might be tax implications, inheritance laws, questions about whether Catherine's will had properly disposed of the assets. And there was Victor Reeves to consider. If his family had appraised the diamonds originally, did they have any claim? You need a lawyer, Jenna said, voicing Maya's thoughts. Like, immediately. With what money? I have $800 left after buying the theater. Maya, you're sitting on millions of dollars in diamonds. I think any lawyer would take your case. But Maya was reluctant to reveal the discovery too widely, too quickly. Victor Reeves had already shown his interest. How many other people might emerge, claiming some connection to Catherine or the diamonds? How many legal challenges might she face? That night, alone in her small apartment, with the eviction notice still taped to her door, Maya researched until her eyes burned. Diamond valuation, estate law, property rights, historic preservation requirements. The more she learned, the more complicated everything became. The diamonds were undeniably valuable, but converting them to cash wouldn't be simple. She couldn't just walk into a jewelry store with millions of dollars in loose stones. They would need proper certification, current appraisals, authentication, and any reputable dealer would ask questions about provenance, about how a pregnant, unemployed woman had come into possession of such wealth. Her phone rang. At 7 the next morning. An unknown number. Maya answered cautiously. Miss Chen? The voice was male, professional, unfamiliar. My name is Richard Bartlett. I'm an attorney representing Victor Reeves. My client wishes to discuss a business proposition regarding the property at 847 Broadway. Maya's stomach tightened. I'm not interested in selling. I understand your position. However, Mr. Reeves is prepared to be quite generous. He's authorized me to offer $25,000 for the property, as is. That's substantially more than fair market value for a condemned building. $25,000. It would solve her immediate problems. Rent, medical bills, a cushion to get through the baby's birth and beyond. But it was also nothing compared to what she'd found in the basement. Why does Mr. Reeves want it so badly? Maya asked. I'm not at liberty to discuss my client's business plans, but I can assure you that $25,000 is far more than you'll recover after paying for either restoration or demolition. The city's requirements are quite stringent. The costs will bankrupt you. I'll think about it. Miss Chen, I strongly advise you not to delay. This offer won't remain open indefinitely. After she hung up, Maya sat staring at her phone. $25,000. Yesterday, that would have seemed like an impossible fortune. Today, knowing what lay hidden in the Starlight's basement, it felt like an insult, but it also felt like proof. If Reeves was willing to offer that much, he definitely knew about the diamonds, which meant the legal situation was even more complicated than she'd feared. Maya made a decision. She needed an ally, someone with expertise who wasn't already aligned with Reeves. She needed someone she could trust. She spent the morning researching estate attorneys in the city, looking for someone with experience in property law and valuable asset recovery. The name that kept appearing in local legal journals was Elena Rodriguez, a lawyer who had handled several high-profile estate disputes involving art and jewelry. Getting an appointment was harder than expected. Rodriguez's secretary was polite, but firm. The attorney's schedule was booked for weeks. Maya was preparing to leave her information when desperation made her blurt out the truth. Please, I need to speak with her today. I found something in a property I purchased. Something valuable. And there's someone trying to take it from me. And I don't know what to do. And I'm 7 months pregnant. And Her voice broke. There was a long pause. Then, "Hold, please." 2 minutes later, Elena Rodriguez herself came on the line. "Miss Chen, this is Elena Rodriguez. My secretary says you've made a discovery in a property purchase." "Yes. Yesterday I bought the Starlight Theater at auction. For $100. There was a man there, Victor Reeves, who tried to outbid me. This morning his lawyer called offering $25,000 for the building." "The Starlight? The condemned theater on Broadway?" Rodriguez's interest was evident. "That's quite a jump from 100 to 25,000. What did you find?" Maya took a breath. "Diamonds. Millions of dollars worth of diamonds, hidden in a basement room with a letter from the original owner saying she wanted them used to restore the theater." Another pause, longer this time. "Can you be at my office in an hour? And bring the letter, any documentation, but not the diamonds themselves. Leave those somewhere secure." Rodriguez's office was in a renovated brownstone near the city's legal district. Elegant, but understated. The attorney herself was in her mid-40s, with sharp eyes and a direct manner that Maya found reassuring. "Start from the beginning," Rodriguez said, setting a recorder on her desk. "I want every detail." Maya told the story: the auction, Victor Reeves' strange behavior, the discovery in the basement, the morning phone call. Rodriguez listened without interruption, making occasional notes. When Maya finished, the attorney sat back, drumming her fingers on the desk. "This is fascinating. And complicated. Let me outline the situation you're facing. First, the good news. If the diamonds were inside your property when you purchased it, and there's no valid will or heir claiming them, they're almost certainly yours under property law. The letter from Catherine Starling reinforces this. She clearly intended for whoever owned the building to have the diamonds." "But," Maya prompted, hearing the hesitation in Rodriguez's voice, "but Victor Reeves' family appraised those diamonds in 1984. They have documentation of their existence and value. If Reeves can argue that Catherine Starling never legally transferred ownership of the diamonds, or that they were held in trust, or any number of other legal theories, he might have a claim." Maya's heart sank. "So, he can take them?" "Not easily. But he can make your life very difficult. Lawsuits, injunctions preventing you from selling the diamonds, court costs that could drag on for years." Rodriguez leaned forward. "The key question is, what do you want? Do you want to sell the diamonds and walk away? Or do you actually want to restore the theater, like Catherine asked?" Maya thought about this. 24 hours ago, her only goal had been survival, keeping her apartment, paying her bills, making it through her pregnancy. Now she was contemplating something far more ambitious. "I want to restore it," she said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. Catherine poured her life into that building. She could have sold the diamonds and lived comfortably. Instead, she left them there, with that letter, hoping someone would honor her vision. Rodriguez smiled. "Then, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get ahead of this, control the narrative before Reeves can build his case." Over the next hour, they developed a strategy. Rodriguez would file paperwork with the probate court, documenting the discovery, establishing Maya's ownership through the property purchase, and requesting authentication of the diamonds through a court-appointed independent appraiser. This would create a legal record that predated any claim Reeves might make. Simultaneously, they would reach out to the Historic Preservation Society that had been fighting the theater's demolition. With funding suddenly available for restoration, that group would become powerful allies in protecting Maya's rights. "This won't be easy," Rodriguez warned, as Maya prepared to leave. "Reeves has resources. He'll fight. And you're about to become very visible. Local news will pick up the story. Pregnant woman finds millions in diamonds. Plans to restore historic theater. It's compelling. I don't care about publicity. I just want to keep what's mine and honor Catherine's wishes." Rodriguez nodded approvingly. "Then, we understand each other. I'll need a retainer. Normally I'd ask for 20,000, but given your circumstances, let's say 5,000, with the rest contingent on successful resolution. 5,000. Maya had $900. I can't. Paid from the diamond sales. Once we secure your legal ownership, Rodriguez. Finished. Until then, I'm taking this case because it's interesting, and because I believe you have a legitimate claim. She stood, extending her hand. Welcome to what will probably be the strangest few months of your life. The news broke 3 days later, exactly as Rodriguez had predicted. Local woman discovers $1 million diamond catch in condemned theater, screamed the headline in the morning paper. By evening, the story had gone national. Maya's phone rang constantly. Reporters, documentary producers, real estate agents, diamond dealers, and more than a few scammers claiming to be long-lost relatives of Catherine Starling. Rodriguez handled most of it, but the attention was overwhelming. The Historic Preservation Society contacted her immediately, their director nearly weeping with joy at the prospect of the Starlight's restoration. They provided architectural plans, original construction documents, photographs from the theater's heyday, a treasure trove of information that would be invaluable for authentic renovation. The court-appointed appraiser spent 2 full days examining the diamonds, working in Maya's presence under Rodriguez's careful supervision. When his report arrived, the numbers were even more staggering than they'd hoped. $380 million, based on current market values for stones of that quality and size. $380 million. The number was too large to comprehend. Maya lay awake at night, her daughter kicking restlessly inside her, trying to imagine what such wealth actually meant. Security, obviously. Opportunity. The ability to honor Catherine's vision and create something meaningful. But also, pressure, responsibility, the weight of others' expectations. Victor Reeves filed his lawsuit exactly 1 week after the news broke. The complaint was lengthy and aggressive, arguing that the diamonds had been held in trust by his family's firm, that Catherine Starling had never taken actual possession, that the appraisal documents represented a continuing business relationship that entitled Reeves and Associates to a percentage of the find. It's all garbage, Rodriguez told Maya, reviewing the filing. But it's expensive garbage. He's hoping to overwhelm you with legal costs, force you into a settlement. The Preservation Society rallied to Maya's defense, filing amicus briefs supporting her ownership claim. Local community groups organized protests outside Reeves' office, accusing him of trying to steal from a pregnant woman. The media coverage was relentlessly pro-Maya, painting her as a sympathetic underdog against a wealthy bully. Through it all, Maya made regular visits to the Starlight, sometimes alone, sometimes with Rodriguez or the Preservation Society's architects. She walked through the damaged auditorium, stood on the stage, imagined what it had been like in 1947 when Catherine Starling first opened the doors. It was during one of these visits, 2 weeks after the news broke, that Maya had her first real confrontation with Victor Reeves himself. She was in the basement, examining the dressing rooms with an architect who was preparing preliminary restoration estimates. They heard footsteps on the stairs, then Reeves's voice echoing through the corridor. "Miss Chen? I know you're down here. We need to talk." Maya emerged from the dressing room, the architect beside her. Reeves stood in the corridor, looking diminished somehow in the stark light of their work lamps. He'd lost the aggressive confidence of their first meeting, replaced by something closer to desperation. "What do you want?" Maya asked. "To make you an offer. A real offer." He pulled out his phone, showing her a number. $5 million. Cash. Right now. You sign over the diamonds, I drop the lawsuit, and you walk away rich. You valued them at $380 million, which you'll never see. The legal fees alone will eat up tens of millions. Court cases could drag on for years, long after your baby is born, long after you've exhausted every resource trying to fight me. He stepped closer. "I can bury you in paperwork, Miss Chen. I have lawyers on retainer. money for endless appeals. You have a court-appointed attorney working on contingency and a baby on the way. How long do you really think you can fight? Maya felt her daughter kick, a rolling movement that suggested restlessness. She placed her hand on her belly, drawing strength from that small life inside her. Catherine Starling worked for 37 years to build this collection, Maya said quietly. She could have spent those diamonds on anything, lived in luxury, retired comfortably. Instead, she invested them, protected them, and left them here with a letter asking that they be used to restore this theater, this building that she poured her life into. Catherine Starling is dead. She doesn't care anymore. Maybe not. But I do. Maya straightened, meeting his gaze directly. I'm not selling. Not for 5 million. Not for 50 million. Those diamonds are going to do exactly what Catherine wanted. Restore the Starlight to its former glory. Reeves' expression hardened. Then you're a fool. And you're going to regret this. Maybe. But at least I'll be able to look at myself in the mirror. She turned to the architect. Come on. We have a lot of work to plan. As they walked away, leaving Reeves standing alone in the corridor, Maya felt something shift inside her. Not the baby this time, but something deeper, a certainty she hadn't possessed before. This wasn't just about money anymore, or even about survival. It was about honoring a legacy, about proving that some things mattered more than profit. The preliminary hearing on Reeves' lawsuit took place in late April. Maya, now 8 months pregnant and moving with the careful deliberation of someone who'd rather not go into labor in a courtroom. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Margaret Hopkins, listened to both sides' arguments with evident skepticism. Mr. Reeves, she said when his lawyer finished an elaborate presentation about trust relationships and fiduciary duty, are you seriously arguing that diamonds hidden in a wall for 40 years, discovered by someone who legally purchased the property, belong to your appraisal firm because your grandfather looked at them once in 1984? Your Honor, the relationship between Reeves and Associates and Miss Starling was more complex than, do you have any documentation showing continued custody of the diamonds after 1984? Not physical custody, but do you have any evidence that Miss Starling intended for your family to maintain any ownership interest? The appraisal documents clearly state, yes, I've read them. They state that your grandfather was paid $1,500 to assess the stone's value. That's not ownership. That's not trust. That's a business transaction. Judge Hopkins turned to Rodriguez. Miss Rodriguez, I'm inclined to agree with your position that the diamonds transferred with the property. However, I want an independent historical investigation into Catherine Starling's intentions. If she left a will or any other documents suggesting different disposition of the stones, Mr. Reeves may have a valid claim. She set a date for a full hearing in 6 weeks, ordered both parties to cooperate with a court-appointed historian, and dismissed them with a warning. I will not have my courtroom turned into a circus. Both of you, keep your media statements measured and factual. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Maya, exhausted and uncomfortable, let Rodriguez handle most of the questions. But one reporter called out directly to her, Miss Chen, there are people saying you're being selfish, that you should sell the diamonds and distribute the money to charity instead of spending it on an old building. What's your response? Maya paused, one hand on her belly. Catherine Starling chose to invest her fortune in beauty, in art, in creating a space where people could come together and experience something magical. I think that's the opposite of selfish. The Starlight will serve this community for generations. That's worth more than any check I could write. The historian assigned to research Catherine Starling's life was a retired professor named Dr. Agnes Mitchell, who approached the task with evident enthusiasm. She spent weeks in archives, tracking down everything from building permits to Catherine's personal correspondence with other theater owners. What emerged was a portrait of a remarkable woman. Catherine Starling had indeed come from a diamond-cutting family, but had broken with tradition to pursue her passion for theater. She designed much of the Starlight herself, working with architects to create spaces that enhanced both sight and sound. She'd been single her entire life, dedicating herself fully to the theater's success, and she'd been methodical about the diamonds. Dr. Mitchell found Catherine's personal journals in the collection of a local historical society, dozens of volumes documenting her life from 1940 until her death in 1984. The final years were particularly poignant. Catherine, knowing she was dying of cancer, making careful plans for her legacy. She had no family. Dr. Mitchell explained to Maya and Rodriguez, showing them copies of the relevant journal entries. Her only sister died in 1978. There were no children, no close relatives. The theater was her child, in a sense. She wrote extensively about her fear that it would be demolished after her death. One entry, dated April 1984, was particularly moving. I have secured the diamonds in their hiding place beneath the stage. My letter, explaining their purpose, is with them. I know I cannot control what happens after I'm gone, but I hope that whoever finds this treasure will see the Starlight as I do, not as a building, but as a gift to our community, a space where magic still exists in an increasingly practical world. She wanted them found, Maya said softly, reading the careful handwriting. She could have donated the diamonds to a museum, could have sold them, and left the money to charity. But she chose this. She chose to leave them hidden, with a letter, hoping someone would honor her vision. Dr. Mitchell nodded. Catherine was a romantic. She believed in fate, in destiny. She writes about wanting the Starlight to call out to someone who would understand its value. The historian looked at Maya with kind eyes. A young mother-to-be, struggling against difficult circumstances, who saw beauty in ruins and potential in abandonment. I think you're exactly who she was hoping would find her gift. The final hearing took place in June, just 2 weeks before Maya's due date. She sat in the courtroom, enormously pregnant, uncomfortable in every position, her daughter seeming to object to the proceedings by kicking her ribs steadily. Dr. Mitchell presented her findings. Rodriguez argued the legal precedents. Reeves's lawyers made increasingly desperate claims about business relationships and implied contracts. Through it all, Judge Hopkins listened with the same stern expression. When everyone had finished, the judge took only 5 minutes to deliberate. This is the clearest case I've seen in 30 years on the bench, she said. Miss Chen legally purchased property. Inside that property, she found assets that the previous owner had deliberately hidden there. The previous owner left explicit instructions for the use of those assets. There is zero evidence of any competing claim. No will contradicting the letter. No documentation showing continued ownership by anyone other than Catherine Starling herself. She looked directly at Victor Reeves. Your grandfather appraised some diamonds 40 years ago. That does not give you ownership rights. Your lawsuit is dismissed. Miss Chen, the diamonds are legally yours. Use them well. The courtroom erupted. Maya felt tears streaming down her face, relief and joy mixing together. Rodriguez was grinning beside her, and across the aisle, Victor Reeves sat frozen, his lawyers already packing their briefcases, ready to move on to the next case. Outside, the media circus had reached its peak, but Maya barely noticed. She stood on the courthouse steps, one hand on her belly, looking out at the city where the Starlight still stood, waiting for its promised restoration. Miss Chen, a reporter called, what are you going to do first? Maya thought about Catherine's letter, about the 37 years of patient accumulation, about the legacy of a woman who had chosen beauty over profit, community over personal gain. I'm going to have a baby, she said, smiling, and then I'm going to restore a theater. Maya's daughter arrived 3 days after the court ruling, 8 pounds of determined personality, who emerged into the world wailing her objections to the entire process. Maya named her Catherine, of course, with Grace as a middle name. Catherine Grace Chen. The hospital room filled with flowers from Rodriguez, from the Preservation Society, from strangers who had followed the story and been moved by it. But the most meaningful gift came from Dr. Mitchell, the historian. A framed photograph of Catherine Starling on opening night of the Starlight, her smile radiant as she welcomed the first audience into her creation. For the new Catherine, the note read, "May she inherit not just a name, but a legacy of courage and vision." Maya spent her maternity leave in a blur of feedings and diaper changes and profound sleep deprivation. But even exhausted, even overwhelmed by new motherhood, she couldn't stop thinking about the Starlight. She hired Rodriguez permanently, not just as her attorney but as her advisor in all things. Together they began the complex process of converting diamonds to funding. The stones were sold carefully, strategically, through reputable auction houses and private dealers. The sales took months, each diamond requiring authentication, provenance documentation, careful marketing to serious collectors. But gradually, the fortune became real money in accounts, capital for renovation, resources to honor Catherine Starling's vision. Maya hired the best architectural firm in the region, specialists in historic preservation. She brought in engineers to assess structural damage, contractors experienced in theater renovation, craftspeople who understood Art Deco design. She established a foundation to manage the restoration and, eventually, the theater's operation. The work began in September, when little Catherine was 3 months old. Maya visited the site daily, her daughter strapped to her chest in a carrier, watching as decades of neglect were slowly reversed. The roof was repaired first, stopping further water damage. Then the systematic work of restoration began. Plaster repaired, woodwork restored, the terrazzo floor cleaned and resealed. Every detail was researched, authenticated, made as close to Catherine Starling's original vision as possible. The original marquee was too damaged to save, but they commissioned an exact replica, working from photographs and architectural drawings. The neon tubes were fabricated by one of the few remaining craftspeople who understood the original techniques. When it was finally installed and illuminated, Maya stood across the street with tears in her eyes, watching the Starlight's name glow against the evening sky for the first time in 40 years. The projection booth was rebuilt, equipped with both modern digital equipment and restored vintage projectors for special screenings. The balcony was reinforced and restored, its elaborate plasterwork repaired by artisans who had trained for decades in this dying art. The seats were replaced with new ones, built to the original specifications, deeper, more comfortable than modern theater seats, with additional legroom that reflected a more gracious era. And beneath the stage, in the basement where Maya had made her discovery, they created the Catherine Starling Memorial Museum. The dressing rooms were preserved exactly as they had been found, with Catherine's costumes and photographs on display. The private office became a small gallery, telling her story, the diamond cutter's daughter, who had built a palace of dreams. The work took 2 years. 2 years of careful craftsmanship, of setbacks and triumphs, of moments when Maya wondered if she was insane to pour so much time and money into an old building. But every time doubt crept in, she would look at the photograph of Catherine Starling, at her granddaughter who bore the woman's name, and remember what this was really about. This wasn't just renovation. It was resurrection. It was honoring a legacy that had almost been lost. It was proving that beauty and art and community still mattered in a world increasingly obsessed with profit and efficiency. The grand reopening was scheduled for the 12th of July 2026, exactly 79 years after Catherine Starling's original opening night. The date approached with mounting excitement, media coverage building as the transformation became visible. National architectural magazines featured the restoration. Historic preservation groups held up the Starlight as a model of what could be achieved. Film societies clamored for booking dates. But for Maya, walking through the completed theater with Catherine Grace toddling beside her, holding her mother's hand with chubby fingers, the most meaningful moment came in quiet solitude. It was 2 days before the opening. The last workers had departed. The building stood silent, waiting. Maya and her daughter had the Starlight to themselves. She walked Catherine Grace through the lobby, now restored to its 1,947 glory. The terrazzo floor gleamed. The domed ceiling's mural of stars had been painstakingly recreated. The ticket booth's brass fixtures shone. Every detail was perfect. A time machine to an era when going to the movies meant stepping into elegance and magic. They entered the auditorium. 1,500 seats rose in elegant curves toward the balcony. The proscenium arch framed the screen, its plasterwork depicting comets and planets in Art Deco splendor. The velvet curtains, deep red with gold trim, hung in perfect folds. Maya sat in the center of the main floor, pulling Catherine Grace into her lap. Her daughter squirmed, babbling in her not-quite words, pointing at the lights and colors. "This," Maya said softly, "is what your great-great-grandmother built, Catherine Starling." She was brave and brilliant, and she believed that beauty mattered, that art mattered, that giving people a place to dream mattered. Catherine Grace looked up at her mother with solemn blue eyes, as if she understood far more than her limited vocabulary could express. "And then," Maya continued, "another Catherine chose to honor that legacy. She hid her fortune, left a letter, and waited for someone to find it. Someone who would see this building not as a liability or a burden, but as a gift, as a responsibility." She thought back to that morning in the auction hall, standing 7 months pregnant, broke and desperate, raising her paddle to bid on a condemned theater she couldn't afford. If someone had told her then what that decision would lead to, the diamonds, the legal battles, the transformation of her entire life, she would never have believed it. "Your first Catherine left us a gift," Maya whispered to her daughter, "and now it's our gift to the city, to everyone who comes here, to you, when you're old enough to understand." The grand reopening exceeded even Maya's ambitious hopes. The mayor attended, along with the entire city council. Film industry luminaries came from Hollywood. But most importantly, the community showed up, families who remembered the Starlight from their childhoods, young people who had only known the building as a condemned eyesore, everyone curious about the fairy tale transformation. The evening began with a ceremony in the lobby. Maya stood at a podium, Catherine Grace held by Jenna nearby, and addressed the crowd. "79 years ago," she said, "a woman named Catherine Starling stood in this space and welcomed the first audience to her theater. She'd poured her heart, her fortune, and her dreams into creating something beautiful, something that would bring joy and wonder to our community." Maya paused, looking around at the restored splendor, at the faces watching her with attention and respect, so different from the pity she'd received at that auction. "When I bought this building 2 years ago, I was broke, pregnant, and desperate. I bid on it not because I had a plan, but because I had nowhere else to turn. I thought I was at the end of my story. I didn't realize I was at the beginning." She told the story then, condensed, but honest, the discovery in the basement, Victor Reeves' attempts to take it from her, the legal battles, the decision to honor Catherine's wishes rather than simply taking the money and walking away. Catherine Starling believed that beauty matters, Maya concluded. That art matters. That giving people a space to dream and imagine and come together matters. She was right. And this theater stands as proof that sometimes the most valuable treasures aren't the ones we can spend, but the ones we preserve for future generations. The screening that followed was a classic from 1947, the year of the Starlight's opening. It's a Wonderful Life, projected on the restored screen, its message of hope and redemption seeming almost too perfect. Maya sat in the center of the auditorium, Catherine Grace sleeping peacefully in her arms, and watched the movie she'd seen a dozen times before. But this time it felt different. This time, she understood George Bailey's journey in a way she never had. How sometimes the greatest wealth comes not from what we accumulate, but from what we give away, from what we preserve, from what we leave behind. The months that followed established the Starlight as a cultural anchor for the city. They screened classic films, hosted live performances, provided space for community events. Maya established scholarship programs for film students, internships for young people interested in theater management, partnerships with schools to bring classes to experience the building's history and beauty. The Catherine Starling Memorial Museum became a destination in itself, telling the story of a remarkable woman who had lived a life of purpose and left a legacy that transcended her lifetime. And through it all, Maya raised her daughter, teaching Catherine Grace about the woman she was named after, about the importance of courage and vision, and staying true to your values even when it's difficult. 3 years after the reopening, on Catherine Grace's 4th birthday, Maya organized a special screening just for children from the community. As she watched dozens of kids settle into the restored seats, their faces lit with excitement, she thought about the journey that had brought her here, from desperate and abandoned to fulfilled and purposeful, from alone to surrounded by community, from the end of her story to the beginning of something far larger than herself. She thought about Victor Reeves, who had seen the diamonds only as profit, who had fought so hard to take them from her. His development company had since filed for bankruptcy, destroyed by his obsession with the Starlight and his failure to secure the fortune he'd coveted. She thought about Catherine Starling, who could have lived in luxury, but chose instead to build something lasting, something beautiful, something that would outlive her. And she thought about her own daughter, who would grow up knowing that sometimes the most important things can't be measured in dollars. That legacy matters more than profit. That courage means doing what's right, even when it's hard. As the movie began, and children's laughter filled the auditorium, Maya stood at the back, watching. The starlight glowed around her, not just with carefully restored lights, but with the intangible magic of a dream fulfilled, a legacy honored, a promise kept. She pulled out her phone and took a photograph not of the screen or the architectural details, but of the audience, of the children experiencing the wonder of cinema in a space created for exactly that purpose. She sent it to Dr. Mitchell with a simple message: Catherine would be proud. The response came quickly. Both Catherines would be proud. And so am I. Maya smiled, slipping her phone back into her pocket. Somewhere, she imagined, Catherine Starling was watching too, satisfied that her life's work had found a worthy guardian, that her gift had been received by exactly the right person at exactly the right time. The abandoned had found purpose, the broken had been restored, and the starlight shone on, exactly as it was always meant to. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.